Before we start the show, I have a quick question for you. Is your resume stuck in the rejection pile? At Resume Assassin, I create powerful resumes that showcase your skills, experience, and achievements, getting you noticed by recruiters. I'll also optimize your LinkedIn profile, transforming it into a magnet for opportunity. Visit resumeassassin.com today. Take charge of your job search. Visit resumeassassin.com. Welcome to Resume Assassin Presents Recruiting Insider, where I create a safe space to have candid conversations with recruiters and LinkedIn thought leaders. This podcast promises to inform, entertain, and inspire. Cynthia Pong, welcome to Recruiting Insider.
Hi, Mary. Thank you so much. It's very, very exciting to be here. I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
Yes. So Cynthia is a sought-after speaker, the author of Don't Stay in Your Lane, a LinkedIn top voice, and a super introvert like myself.
Yay!
She's also been featured on NBC, CBS, NPR, and many more. As an executive coach, she empowers women in leadership roles to advance their careers into positions of power. As the founder of Embrace Change, she leads an elite team who provides specialized coaching and training programs for high-performing women to the C-suite. She has helped clients break down barriers, lead with authenticity, and has collectively negotiated over $750,000 in salary increases. She is truly an incredible human.
Thank you, Mary.
Today, we are going to discuss how to break down barriers for women in leadership positions. So, Cynthia, let's kind of just dig right in.
Yeah.
In your experience, what are some of the biggest barriers that women face when pursuing leadership roles?
Oh, where to begin with that one? And also, I'll just have a quick asterisk because you did make me sound incredible, and I appreciate that. But
You are incredible.
Oh, thank you. The 750K plus my clients negotiated. I didn't negotiate for them, but
Yep.
of course we worked on the negotiation coaching. So definitely want to give folks credit where it's due. But I think the barriers for women who really want to break through some of these glass ceilings and concrete ceilings, it really comes down to two buckets, if you will. One is the external, which is the systemic, the institutional barriers and biases, the motherhood tax, like all of that kind of stuff. And then there's also the internal. So a lot of that is internalized from the external. So our feelings of imposter syndrome, fear of failure, not wanting to let people down in your home life and life versus your work life, all of those kinds of things. And, they pack a really good 1-2 punch in terms of keeping a lot of us from reaching these positions. But always want to be super clear. A lot of it is the systemic external kind of barriers. At the same time, doesn't mean we're powerless. There is a lot we can still do if that is our goal in our careers.
It seems like, the qualities of a leader and the path to really achieve those leadership roles are still largely outdated, right? And they seem to shut women out in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think it's by design.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
100%. It is by design. There's bizarre ways that, I guess I say bizarre, but really is it all that bizarre? Not really if you think about it, but that the workplace can mimic like a very heteronormative, traditional, patriarchal family structure. I actually talk about this in my piece that was in The Atlantic, which I don't know if the video is showing, but it's like hung up on the wall over here, which is like the dark side of how a workplace can seem like a family. And so you find this a lot of times in a lot of companies and things where it is the man who is at the top and the C-suite is largely men. If there are women or people of color in the C-suite, then they're usually relegated to certain roles. And, I say relegated to be like a little extra hot take, but like it is, I think also, we are kind of pigeonholed into certain roles like HR, chief people officer, when it was more of a thing, chief diversity officer. Those kinds of softer roles that are not about hard strategy, not about financials, those are the places where it's really super dominated by men still.
It has a lot to do with some of those barriers that, us as
Right.
women are still facing and trying to break down. And I don't think that there's a shortage of qualified women, to fill
No.
those leadership roles, right? There's a
Yeah.
ton of super qualified women.
Yes, it's not a pipeline issue. It's not a
Exactly.
skills deficit that we have. That's very common kind of reasons that you may see attributed to this like vertical segregation that we see on a gender basis, which is even more amplified when you fold in race as well. But it's not that. You're absolutely right, Mary. And there's HBR research from a year or two ago that shows how women in the senior leadership C-suite levels, their 360s, they score consistently higher than men in those same roles.
Why do you
So,
think that is?
I mean, I think it's because we're really good at leadership.
Yeah.
It's just that there's so much, such a strong narrative and so much messaging around the fact that we're not, or we're not cut out for it, and also that maybe we have to sacrifice so much to get there that for some of us it isn't worth it. Um, so that's a super real thing too. But yeah, I just think it's so telling that that's what the stats are. And it's also because as you rise more into leadership, it's less and less about what you were good at doing as that individual contributor and like your subject matter expertise. It's less and less about that. And it's more and more about the people skills. Can you actually lead a cross functional team? Can you be an empathic leader? Do you have strong, deep, active listening skills? It's really that type of thing that allows you to work with a range of stakeholders to do complex strategic problem solving, all of that stuff. And, I would say with the conditioning and the societal positioning of women from when we are girls and like how we have, grown up from childhood, that positions us very well for doing those things.
Oh, for sure. Looking at statistics too, it seems women currently outnumber men in earning like bachelor's degrees and master's degrees.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
men are far more likely than women to rise into some of those higher paying and what I would
Yeah.
consider more prestigious leadership roles. So, what
Yes.
are you doing specifically to help women overcome this?
Oh, yeah. And also, you're so right about that education thing. It's wild to me. And just as a side note to that, it's also why I encourage a lot of folks to think very carefully before stacking yet another degree upon degree upon degree. You already can do the thing. That's not what's holding you back. It's other stuff, which is a segue to answer your question directly.
Yeah.
um, which is focusing on what is this other stuff that we can do. And I think a lot of it, we may hate to hear it, but a lot of it has to do with building strategic relationships in places and spaces and with people whom we might be less comfortable doing that with. So a strategic networking strategy, number one. Number two, also making sure that we find ways to amplify and increase our visibility so that we are more visible to enough of the right people. And I say it in that clunky way because it's really true. Like a lot of us, we're also from our just, broad swaths, like painting with a broad stroke or broad brush or whatever. I love to get phrases wrong, by the way. Also, like, try
Same.
saying but anyway, broad strokes. We often have tighter and deeper networks and relationships, but really what we need to do is expand it and broaden our networks. And in certain spaces where we might be made to feel unwelcome, or, we could leverage, like both of us are introverts, right? So
Yep.
I'm always about how do we hack that and make that work for us. It may mean that my networking, connecting with people looks different, but do I still have 175K LinkedIn followers and community on there? Yes. It can be done, but I like a lot of the one-on-one. So I focus on that or environments where it works for me. So coming up with a combo networking and visibility strategy. Are you being seen? Are you being seen in the right places? Are you being seen as a leader in the right places? Like this is a lot of what we talk about in our leadership accelerator program is just about let's be smart. Where do we want to be visible to get to the goals that we have? So you kind of like, work backwards with the goal setting there. And then you just have a plan. Like each week, what am I going to do to be more visible in these spaces? Who am I reaching out to? All of that kind of thing. And then the third thing I would say is make sure you have your inner circle of people who you can rely on. So that may be people like you know, who are industry experts and can provide that like tactical, technical, strategic support on the things. Make sure that the resume is at the right executive level. Make sure that, you know, folks are interviewing properly and reaching out to recruiters the right way. That might be a piece of it. Another piece of it is the mindset stuff, you know, that really gets into that internal stuff that we have going on. So that could be, I'm a huge fan of therapy. Other forms of healing exist. Working with a career executive coach, you know, figuring out what that executive presence looks like for you. That entire bucket, you got to have your advisors in place so that they're supporting you, and also saying your name in rooms and spaces that you're not in. So sponsors and champions there as well. All of it kind of loops in together if you sort of see those are kind of like interlocking pieces, but
Yeah.
that's what I would say is the formula.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's amazing advice. And I think that the other aspect of it, and you kind of touched on this as well, is many women struggle with self-promotion too, right?
Yes, yes.
You know, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate, you know, how can we encourage these women to confidently advocate for their leadership abilities?
Oh, that's hard. And I also just want to say, like, yeah, that's so real. I will even tell you all, like, moment of vulnerability or whatnot. Like, I'm often still uncomfortable with the fact that my anthem award is like right here behind my shoulder. But like, I force myself to put it there. And I probably should have a copy of Don't Stay in Your Lane in my background, but I don't because like, you know, I'm still kind of working on that too. And I'm someone who's like has a lot of visibility online and in different digital and in-person spaces. So I just say that to say like, you know, none of you all are alone. We're not struggling alone in silos. We're stronger together. And we're each on our own timeline and path with that comfort level. So with the self-promotion part, I mean, one, you could view it as self-promotion. Two, you could view it as self-advocacy.
Yeah.
You could view it as I'm simply stating facts about myself and what I've done, what I've achieved, where my expertise is at. So I think that's an important reframe to consider. And the truth is, for women of color, for people of color, if we don't self-advocate, we're going to get chewed up and spit out so fast. Yeah. It's just not a question. So, you know, are we able to meet the reality that we're in? I think it's an imperative if we have certain financial, career, leadership goals. And I don't think it has to be like a painful slog throughout. Like we can make it fun too, and you can make it work for yourself. So yeah, just a huge nod to like, yeah, the self-promotion can feel uncomfortable. I would say maybe a baby step is, and kind of a stepping stone to this is thinking about not as promoting yourself, but actually promoting the work that you're doing and the mission that you have behind the work that you're doing. So another thing that we unpack in whether it's my coaching VIP day or like leadership accelerator packages and stuff is, yeah, what is your career mission? What are you trying to do with this whole entire thing? Because when we are women, when we do have these identities, everything we do is not only for us, it also is for everyone else who comes from a similar background to us, who looks like us, who looks to us to see what's possible. So there's a bigger responsibility, and I take that on with full force because I think it's a huge privilege to be able to do that and, you know, try to break down barriers. But yeah, so just remembering it's not only about you, it's never only about you, it's also about the future and the current folks who are looking to you, and talk about it as your why. Like, why are you doing this? Why is that important? And of course, you should be the one who is there executing on that why.
I work with a lot of women leaders specifically and writing resumes for them, and they always have the toughest time either finding those achievements or, you know, talking about those achievements or even being willing to write them on their resume because they don't feel like, you know, if I didn't single-handedly achieve something, I shouldn't be listing it on my resume. And I like to explain to people that it's, you know, even if you played a role in achieving something, it's still your achievement. Of course, there was a team around you that helped you do this. You didn't achieve it on your own, but it's still something worth writing on your resume, worth shouting from the rooftops in a sense, right?
Yes.
And I think a
Yes.
lot of us women do have issues or trouble bragging about ourselves. And I love your idea of reframing that mindset to self advocacy because, like you said, at the end of the day, we're going to be the very best advocates for ourselves and what we've done and what we've achieved and also what we're capable of. So I think that that's so empowering.
Yeah, I'm fond of saying we have to be our own hype woman first before anyone else is going to jump on the gravy train or whatever. And it's true because, and I'm curious actually if you see this with your clients because I knew you were going to go to that point with the I had a feeling. I was like, are you talking about the we thing? Like when people put in the resume, they want to frame it as a we thing, like a
Yeah.
team effort instead of claiming the part that they led or what have you. And I would actually argue that, I think, yeah, this might get me in some hot water, but I think men generally they'll claim stuff that they barely had anything to even like do with. Do you know what I mean? And it's like
Yeah.
the gulf in behavior is very interesting. But yeah, the resume, cover letter, interview process, that's not the place for you and your team. That's the place for you. And, we do have to close any distortion or gap that there might be between what we see as a reflection. I think of it as like funhouse mirrors. A lot of us, like our whole lives, it's like we've been looking in funhouse mirrors that are like all distorted and stuff. And then it's like the second you work with somebody like Mary and like you're reflecting back the actuality, then there's a resistance, right? Because like that's not me. Like you look in a real mirror after looking at funhouse mirrors for 20 years, you're going to have a reaction. Um, and that process can be fraught and difficult, and take time. And that's all well and good. We have to have space for that. Um, but little by little, we can chip away at these things. Cool.
You work with, a lot of women of color and just women in general, helping them step into leadership roles. So if I were a fresh client of yours, could you walk me through how you would help me break down some of those barriers to step into a leadership role?
Oh, such a juicy question. Um, I do love to start with the big foundational stuff because I'm a
Yeah.
real like let me get a whole sense and comprehensive sense of the person and the landscape that they're facing and then break it down into the smaller pieces. So one thing I already mentioned before is the career mission part. So like big picture, I'd want to know what is Mary's why? What are you aiming to achieve with your life's kind of body of work? What purpose do you want it to serve for you in your life? And then figure out what that long range target is, and then work backwards and be like, okay, well, how does XYZ leadership position fit into this bigger picture? And just, test it. Like, is that the way to what you ultimately want to go to? Or is this also maybe some idea that you had that you were like, I should do this, but it's really not actually for you. Like maybe your path is entrepreneurship or something else, like, so I always like to just double check those things before we
Yeah.
really invest a lot into diving deep. And then once we've clarified, like, okay, where you want to go, where you're at now, what the next step might be, then it just breaks down into problem solving. So, what are the specific blocks that come up for you? Is it perfectionistic tendencies and you're spinning your wheels, spending too much time on things that you don't have enough bandwidth to actually go out and make those relationships? Is it the imposter syndrome? Like you have a debilitating fear, and that's not a definition of imposter syndrome, but I'm just painting a picture here. Let's say you have like a really strong fear of going to certain spaces because you do feel like that imposter when you have all the receipts to back it up that you're not. You have every much of a right to be there as anyone else. Is it a confidence thing that's, maybe related to some of the others, but maybe it's also separate? And so, how do we find ways to build your confidence, help you be able to see, identify, and claim the achievements like you were talking about just now, and really own them and bring them up to people when it makes sense to, so that you can be the first person who's top of mind the next time a
Yeah.
position opens up before they even post it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
that's where we want to get you if that's actually the goal. But those are some examples without getting into like specifics.
Okay, so you've helped me get that seat at the table now. We've broken down the
Okay.
barriers. We
Great.
reverse engineered everything, right? We figured out what my goals are. we broke down the barriers. You helped me get there. So now I have my seat at the table. There's a lot more challenges coming up my way.
Yeah. New levels, new devils.
Yep, a whole new set of issues arise, right? So
Yes.
how would you help someone in this situation have a
hmm
really strong voice to make sure that their ideas are valued and actually heard?
Okay. So one is kind of like the bad news piece, which is that we can't necessarily control if our ideas are valued or heard.
Yeah.
All we can do, but it's enough, is we can make sure that we voice our ideas, we bring them to the table, and that we do everything in our control to be heard. And like, if we're not being heard here, then we go back, we know when to go back to the drawing board and either take a different approach, go to a different space, try a different strategy, find an advocate to, I mean, this is kind of the ugly truth of it. Sometimes we have to tell the white guy sponsor champion what the idea was so that he can say it first and then we can move the work forward. That happens. And sometimes we do that strategically because we have a bigger goal moving forward. It doesn't mean that we like let our ideas get stolen all the time. Don't get me wrong on that. But it's more of a means to an end thing. We're always doing a cost benefit analysis for whatever a particular thing is. If the stakes are high enough, we got to go that route. I say no shame in that game. And we make sure that we have our, what I like to call career insurance and like our protections in place so that if anything goes sideways, we're still fine. Because this is just a possible tangent. But one thing that happens a lot to women is the glass cliff phenomenon. So we can, talk about that. But like once you get to that level, we have to make sure that we're not being set up in some kind of way to basically fail. But one thing I will say, like once you're in the position, the first 30, 60, 90 days, crucial. So really the work to make sure that you step into that role and you're your best, most confident self has to begin before. Like it can't start on like your day one. It has to be like T minus, honestly, ideally like T minus years, so that you've been doing the work already, you have a solid foundation. You're not really rattled by any of those internal barriers anymore. This is really more about like, how do you step up your leadership, command the influence, control, and respect that you want in the boardroom or wherever it is. Because the chess match is like really high level at this point. It's like 4D chess or what have you. So you want to make sure, you know who all the stakeholders are, you know how to maneuver, and it will give, it will take some time to do that. That's why I said like 30, 60, 90 days. But the work for that to prepare you mentally, emotionally, psychologically, tactically has to start sooner. So, that's some high level thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned a glass cliff. So let's kind of go back to that because that's an interesting concept to me. Yeah. Could you, first of all, just kind of define what that is and what are some signs that we may be facing a glass cliff in our own career?
Oh, I love it. It's true because it may not always show up the same and it might not always be at that high level. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so glass cliff is called that because the glass part is from like glass ceiling. So the idea that this is something that women in particular or people of color, other people who are historically denied, that top seat or whatever at the table, may face. So that's the glass part. The cliff part is because at this point, you're high up in the org chart, you're at the very tippy top or what have you. And it is a cliff that it's like a sheer drop and you can fall, with just one misstep. And the cliff also to kind of give a sense of how dire the consequences can be for our careers. This is not to be like alarmist about it or anything, but it just happens. And if you Google or look up on Wikipedia glass cliff, you can see example after example, high profile examples of women who have faced this and experienced it. So that's what it is. It's when you get promoted to a very high level, and the phenomenon refers to the situation when usually the company is in a bad spot. They're coming out of some kind of major scandal or like a very bad economic year. Like just, it's a big mess. It's a dumpster fire. There's losses everywhere. Shareholders are upset. Like it's that kind of a just raging mess. And then they will promote a woman to be CEO of just fill in the blank, major F100 company. So it's like, okay, great. A woman is in this position. And also, what are we expecting her to do? And then like the idea is like, the woman has to turn this whole thing around, clean up the whole mess that was created usually by men, and then like excel and look great while doing it. That's like the brief, as it were, and that's what it refers to, because you can then very easily see that one little thing, or like the next little kind of snafu that happens, can get blamed on that woman, and then all of a sudden, like, she's resigned or she's forced out, and then she can't find work at that level in other places. So that's like the worst case scenario of a glass cliff. Um, so how we can kind of like look out for it or make sure we don't kind of fall prey to this setup. And again, I want to emphasize this could happen at other levels too. So you may be moving from individual contributor to your first manager position, director, something, and it could be a similar, plate that you're handed, where it's just a whole mess. They're asking you to do the impossible, and it's just a setup for failure. So it can look any kind of ways. But I think the way to identify it early and make sure you're not set up in this way is, I mean, you got to have your people in place, that you have that third thing I mentioned earlier about the inner circle and your advisors. If you have enough people who everybody can play a different role at this. You can think of it kind of like Knights of the Round Table. Everyone has a different role. So you need some people who are like embedded in the industry, or who've been around the block for, ahead of you, as it were, in the industry, and who know the players and can maybe give you a heads up that, like, hey, Mary, I know that, we're talking about you going for this particular CEO position. Just be very careful about XYZ, or ask a lot of questions around this. You might want to do extra due diligence on why. Like, think about it and maybe consider these other things. So you want to have your early warning system of people who have insider knowledge giving you a heads up. I also think that the other thing about it is the career insurance thing that I talked about
Yeah.
earlier, which I've kind of just coined this term that I think all of us need to have in this day and age, like 2024. Layoffs are still happening. Like, it's been how many years? We're still hearing about mass layoffs, and it's a wild economic and jobs market still. Um, anyway, I could go into that's a whole other podcast, but um, we all need to make sure that we have the network that's going to help us survive and thrive, to make sure we have multiple revenue streams, so we're never relying on any one thing in particular. We got to be able to be nimble and pivot, not only for startups and tech people, and just like the right skills to be able to land on our feet no matter what comes our way. So you could have gone for a glass cliff scenario, but still find your way out of it and land on your feet. Um, there's people who I'm kind of watching their public route right now, but I suspect they're actually going to be fine despite what might have looked like a glass cliff thing happening. But I suspect they're going to pop up in another couple months and actually be totally golden, and even maybe winning more because of it, because they've spent decades building up their own career insurance. So they've got their safety nets. They don't need to rely on
Yeah.
any one company or anything like that. And it's just a much safer way to pursue your career goals.
That's great. I mean, I love that comparison to investing, essentially, where you don't want
Yeah.
to put all of your money into one stock. You want to make sure that
Yes.
you're building it up, you're diversifying your portfolio. That's great. And I want to shift the conversation just a little bit, because a lot of your work also stems around leading with authenticity, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
And women, they don't really need to conform to those traditional leadership styles, like we've already kind of touched on. Could you discuss how women can learn to lead authentically while still incorporating their own unique perspectives and experiences?
Yeah. I love that you asked this, because it does feel like an impossible needle to thread, but I do know that it's possible. Like, I do see people doing it. I feel like I'm always trying to level up my game and doing it myself too. And you've probably experienced it too. Like, when we are ourselves, people resonate with that, because there is just so much like fake performative stuff out here. And I think en masse we're reaching our limits with just that. But anyway, the sort of, I think ways to do this are finding, sometimes it's about finding a middle ground between what you know is expected of you, and what you know, or you sense intuitively in your gut is going to get what you need done, and then finding a way to inject you into it. I know this is very vague and abstract, but it is because I can't say what it is for any particular person. Like maybe for one person, it means, doing it with a certain set of values at the forefront. Maybe it's about framing something and actually wordsmithing something in a certain way that is meaningful and will allow other people to have a different reaction to a same result. Maybe it's about the energy you bring in to when you're leading a team meeting or getting a meeting with department heads or other VPs or things like that. It could be any of these things, and it could be small micro ways that it feels like, but I think those are the ways that we find to slowly, block by block, build up our own version of authentic leadership. And I do think that this is really important because a lot of us, especially women, people of color, we get put off by this abstract idea of like, oh, but if I'm a leader, I have to be like in a suit and like I have to be very, I don't know, I'm making robot moves, but a certain box.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that's not the way forward. That's not the future. That's not what
Yeah.
we need. It's not where everything is going. And I even have this like personality, like BuzzFeed style personality quiz that's a leadership quiz so that we can get some of the language around how we are already leading in an authentic way that's specific to, I mean, this is specific to women of color, but ways that we tend to show up as leaders. It's not this traditional conformist thing. And it's really helpful for people just to like feel seen and heard, have some language. I mean, we're all about like language is so important. Have some language to talk about what they bring to the table. And I can break down like what those four kind of archetypes are that I see, but it's I don't want to get too far into the weeds.
Yeah, I mean, figure out what makes you you, right? What makes you authentic? How do you relate to people? And then I think that's a great start in figuring out how you can authentically step into those leadership spaces. And it seems that a lot of women who are really authentic, they also have a good understanding of themselves, and their priorities.
Yeah.
And they also figure out what's important to them rather than what other people want, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're clear about how they feel, what they need, what they prefer, all those things. So I think for many of our listeners, they're trying to step into their authentic self in a lot of different ways, right? And lead in a way that's really true to themselves. So what advice would you give them? What's one step that they could take today to do that?
Yes. Okay, great. I mean, I think you already said it, to be honest, which is to block the time. Like, seriously, take 30 minutes, take 90 minutes if you can. That's my preferred, a 90-minute or longer chunk for deep work to think about who who are you? Because all of this work really, it is about deepening your self-knowledge. It is about reframing and deepening and redefining your own relationship with yourself. It just comes out as work or leadership or career, like whatever these, other words we put on it. But taking that time to just journal and be like, what are the things that are most important to me in life, in career, in this job? What is my career mission? Like, what am I trying to achieve here long range? Why? Why do I do that? What moves me? What energizes me? What activates me? What gets me really going about this thing? That's important because that will fold into values, which is, kind of the things that stem out under that, under your why and under your career mission. So what values are important to you? Those will all be the pieces that come together and will help you define you and your authentic leadership. Like it's all going to just come together in like a messy soup or what have you. But then, you can then boil down what that means to you. And having that clarity, that's what allows people to be like, this is what's important to me. That's not important. I'm not giving that any of my time. I'm focusing on this. Like that level of confidence, I do think a lot of us really, we want that, right? Like that's what we think it is. And that is strong leadership. Whether you're in whatever position you're in, that is strong leadership because you are taking ownership over what gets your attention, what gets your time, what gets your dedication, and what doesn't. So ultimately, it just really boils down to some very basic stuff that we often back burner because that good old Eisenhower matrix. We love to focus on putting out the fires and the urgent important stuff that other people externally are telling us is important. And we don't pay attention to what actually is important that we should be investing in our time, money, resources, all of that. And that's that quadrant 2. out of the paycheck. That deep work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something that you touched on previously too. And we briefly touched on storytelling and how that really makes a great leader, and how women who share their stories can really shape the next generation of women leaders, right? So I'm
Yeah.
curious, could you share an example of a woman leader that you admire? What leadership qualities do you find inspiring about their story?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I love AOC. I'm a big, big fan of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Hmm.
And what I love about her story is what aligns with me because I mean some folks may or may not know. I mean, they probably assumed, but Embrace Change is like my second career. You know, the career coaching and the training and the speaking and all that, my second career. My first career, which I write about in Don't Stay in Your Lane, was as a public defender. So that was what I wanted to do for the longest. And when I burned out, I had no choice but to reinvent what on earth I was doing. Um, Ties back to AOC because, you know, she's not, you wouldn't look at past her and be like, that's a future congressperson. Like, that's a future political leader. You know, that's a future potential, like, presidential candidate. Like, you wouldn't look at that. You know, her bartending background, like, just really salt of the earth kind of like background. And I love that she has had this story where she has just not taken no for an answer. I feel like it's so gutsy. I mean, there's incredible leadership that she's just had from the early days, this unshakable belief in herself, and just like defying the odds. I love that story. I think I love everything it stands for, and I love her values, of course, because it aligns with, you know, my kind of roots and still core values in Embrace Change. Um, and yeah, so that's a story I think about a lot of times when I, you know, when I get frustrated myself too, because it's a hard time right now. It's a hard year for a lot of people. It's hard to witness a lot of our clients struggling, you know, in all kinds of ways between jobs or just like, you know, having to deal with a lot of unfairness in the workplaces and spaces. So that impacts us, I think, too. I mean, I don't know how it is for you, but I'd imagine, you know, when you hear about a lot of those things and I know I'm personally like, I can't go and fix that, you know, for the person.
Right.
It's just hard. So it is important, as my former public speaking coach told me, it's like data is great, but stories transform. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you asked this question. And yeah.
I love that. That's an amazing response. So, what are the top three things that you want our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Oh, this is hard. You might have already guessed I'm like an expansive person. A lot of words, a lot of energy. So editing myself is my growth edge. But three things I would say: invest time every single week into building the right network that you need. It's people hire people they like, people hire people they like, know and trust. Especially if you are on that leadership track, you're gonna need people. So invest today. Um, the second thing, and I'm gonna try to make a triple out of invest because I like that you said that. And it is about that. Invest in deepening your self-knowledge.
Hmm.
Like end of the day, our relationship with ourselves is the most important relationship. We are always with ourselves. We at the end of the day, truth be told, we have only ourselves and our own integrity to answer to. So invest time, money, resources, whatever it is, into deepening your self knowledge, be that through therapy, career executive coaching, another healing modality, your own journaling, whatever it is, right? Carve the time out for that and pay attention to that because it's easy to focus on the fires. Um, the third thing, I feel like this is my like third wish with a genie or something. Um, Maybe the third takeaway is yeah, find ways to be your own hype woman. You know, we really have to be that initial spark to set off like a bigger fire around what we're doing. And like I said, it's never only about you. What we each individually do as women, as people of color, as women of color is way more about it's about the collective, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. So it's important. And whatever that means, maybe it means taking up a new hobby that makes you feel really confident and like I can learn new things and it gives you joy. Like that could be the thing that helps you be your own hype woman. It could be doing the work of writing down and owning your achievements
Yeah.
when you don't want to. It could be reaching out to somebody that you felt intimidated by or something, but you made that move, and whether they write back or not, it's not on you. You reached out. So you get credit for that. Finding ways to just really solidify that foundation, because that's going to be yours wherever you go. And it is that base building block to the career insurance thing I was talking about. Yeah. So that's the 3 takeaways.
That's good. And I'm glad that you mentioned invest in yourself, because I feel like there's a lot of narrative on LinkedIn right now that says invest in upskilling, right? Try to get these certifications, try to get better at this skill, that skill, which is amazing. Of course, that's a part of your career. But I think that a lot of us do tend to overlook actually doing that deep introspection and really investing in ourselves. What do we want? Yeah. Why do we want it?
Yeah.
So I think that that's amazing insight.
Oh my God. I love that. That's also so interesting to know. Always pay attention to who is telling you what you should be doing. Yeah. What is their agenda?
Yeah, exactly.
What are they trying to tell you?
Yeah.
Is that really what you need? We need to have that discernment always. Mm-hmm. And that only gets stronger if you do invest in your own self-knowledge. And yeah, I don't put a lot of stock into this. Oh, well, if only I had another degree or another certification, I'd be able to do the thing. No. You're good enough as it is. Yeah. It's actually some of this other stuff we have to clear out that honestly might be the harder work to do than to go to school for another fill in the blank.
Yep. It may be more of an internal barrier than an external skill barrier.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Cynthia, what are you up to now, and where can we find you on social media?
Oh my gosh, what am I up to? I mean, I feel like so many things, but we're growing, we're doing a lot of stuff. Folks can find us on the internet. embracechange.nyc is the website, and everything is linked from there. But the main social channels I recommend for folks are LinkedIn, of course. You can search my name, Cynthia Pong, and find it most easily. Instagram at embracechange.nyc. Also, we have a really great poppin' YouTube channel where you can hear all kinds of tutorials and get tips from me. That's the same handle, embracechange.nyc. But the thing I really want to tell folks about, and this is a thing that they think it's all about the social media or whatever, but the real thing is actually my newsletter. If people get on my newsletter, the trajectory, that's where I share the actual meat and heart of the stuff that's going to help you move the needle in your career. That's where we share all of our exclusive bonuses or early offers, early bird stuff. All the good stuff is on the newsletter. So folks want to get on that. You get tons of freebies through it. But if you sign up at embracechange.nyc/signup, you will get my freebie. That's 5 steps to a winning negotiation mindset, so you can get that money. So I encourage people to sign up for the trajectory there and talk to me through it. That's the main line to my inbox. People can reply there and we can chat about their specific situation. So thank you.
Amazing. Thanks for coming on today. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thanks for the work you're doing. I'm so amped for your podcast, pun intended.
Woo!
I know it's changing lives out here, so thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. I will be releasing episodes every Monday, so be sure to subscribe on the platform that you are watching this. Give it a 5-star review, and we'll see you next time.